Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. Today I'm drawing a blank. And I don't mean by that I'm not sure what I'm doing or how to do it. I quite literally mean I'm drawing a blank, like a switch blank. Stick around and I'll show you why and what I can do after it's drawn. Now for some of you this may seem like a silly thing to do because hey, it's just a switch blank, go online and buy it. I have not been able to find the switch blank that correctly fits the Mitsubishi Fuso, and if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about these. Now there are also other switch blanks in here which a previous owner has kindly hacked up to fit some toggle switches, but I need blanks. They look like this, and they do not seem to exist anywhere I can find them. Now maybe I should elaborate a little bit. I'm not just going to draw the switch blank for fun, I'm actually going to produce one. And that is because once I've drawn this in 3D, I can 3D print one. That's great for a blank, but it also gives me the option to modify the drawing to add in the proper sizing for one of these rocker switches, toggle switches, push buttons, maybe USB outlets and things like that. Then I can properly use these cutouts and replace these ones with whatever I want. For 3D design, I use Sketchup. It's free and pretty easy to use. Let's start with a simplified example. I'm going to draw a rectangle that's 19 by 40 millimeters. Next, I'll grab the push-pull tool and pull it up by 1 millimeter. Now that I have a base, I'll use the offset tool to set the edge in by 0.5 millimeter. And then I'll extrude the new, smaller edge up by 20 millimeters. This has given us a basic box the size of a switch blank. If I want to add a rectangular hole for a rocker switch, I just draw another rectangle and push it through. Now obviously, I'd be taking more time to get things actually centered, but you get the idea here. Now we have the shape that we're looking for with a hole punched in it that kind of resembles the end goal. Of course, if I want a round hole, I just pick the circle tool, draw the circle the size that I want, and push it through the same way. This is obviously an oversimplified example, but I think you get the idea of how easy Sketchup can be, so let's fast forward to the actual switch blank. As you can see, it's a little more complex, but it uses the same techniques to get to this point. Now, because I want a nice flat front to this switch, I'm actually going to print it upside down. This results in a couple of overhanging surfaces, but they're small enough that the printer can handle it. Next, I need to export this 3D model into the slicer software to turn it into something the 3D printer can understand. During this process, I can set the quality, speed, and material I'm using, and I can also get a visual of how it's sliced into layers and look and see if anything is wrong. The X pattern that you see at the bottom is called infill, and this saves material when printing something that would otherwise be solid. Once I've confirmed that everything looks good, I will hit export and it will create a G-code file that the printer can use to make the part. So let's see what we've come up with. We've got the hole in the console over there. And here's the original switch. The original switch, as you can see, a little bit rounded on the corners, got some clips on the outside, and on the inside, which will add a little bit of extra light for it, you can see little ridges. How did that turn out into the 3D produced one? Well, it's not exactly the same, but you can see it's got some rounded corners, it's got the clips to hold it in, and it's got some structure on the inside. Now again, this is just a blank. I haven't modified this into ones with holes yet, but let's give it a test fit. Now in this piece of the console, you can see there are multiple sizes and shapes, and somebody has tried to make another one and throwing their pet mouse in there to open the hole up for some reason. But the main one I'm going to focus on to start with is this one. Once I've got this one sorted out, maybe I'll move on to these ones and create some nicer looking blanks, or maybe put a voltmeter or something in there. But this one to start. Now, I'm not sure how the designers came up with this. Normally a switch would just push in. But Mitsubishi has made a bracket that fits into the back that holds the switch and then pushes in. So I've already removed these two screws. There's also two little clips on the side. So when you're removing these, just be careful that you don't force the clip. Okay. It's also easier on this one because it's already missing two of the switches. So that leaves the kind of shell of the console and the piece where the switches actually go in. So we can see once we've got this piece out, this is where the switch actually pops into. So this is the original, pops in there. The little tabs on the back hold it from coming out, and that's fairly secure. This goes back in and it's mounted through the console. Let's see how my 3D printed part fits. Here's the 3D printed switch. Again, not identical. I've got to have basically a flat surface on the front. I can't do quite as good of a rounding of the corners, but I think it's going to do the trick. Same idea on the back where I've got the corners cut off, and see how this one fits. Pops in, nice and secure. Switches are mounted in this piece. Grab this one. It's a little bit tricky putting things back together here. Basically, it's going to go this way. We've got to make sure that the switches clear the hole that they're going into at the same time as lining up with the tabs on the back. Basically, if you just kind of push it straight in, you end up with switches installed on the front. I think that worked out reasonably well. I've made mine a little shorter just because it doesn't need to stick through anymore. I could make it a bit taller. I don't think it gains us anything. So now we've got a switch blank that fits. Let's put some holes in it and mount some other switches in them. Here is the easy one. A 1/2-inch hole in the center pushed through, and we should be able to fit a small toggle switch. The rocker switch is going to be a bit more of a squeeze, but it follows the same idea. I draw a rectangle and push it through. I have to adjust some of the stiffeners underneath, but it's not that big a deal. I've created a couple different styles, and let's check them again in the slicer before we send all 4 to the printer at the same time. Everything looks good to me, so it's over to the printer. I use software called Octoprint as the interface because I can easily see all the temperatures, check the camera setting, do one last check of the G-code, and make sure that everything looks good before I hit go. My printer is a slightly modified Ender 3 V2, and it's a wicked little printer. I'm using PLA Plus filament, which generally gives pretty good results. Watching something appear out of thin air on a 3D printer is super cool. There are so many things you can create. As always, I'll put an affiliate link in the video description where you can get an Ender 3 V2 if you think this is something that you want to do. I absolutely love mine. As always, any purchases made through these links help support the channel. Fast forward to a couple of hours later and the switches are printed and they're installed. I think those came out quite all right. Now, if you want to know what these switches and buttons are going to be used for, you should probably subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications because it's going to be quite a while before I get to installing the rest of that. I hope you enjoyed that video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.